The sun was beginning to dip behind the skyscrapers of Manhattan, casting long shadows over the polished glass towers and bustling sidewalks. From the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse apartment, Emily Carter stood in silence, staring out at the city she had once conquered with fire in her heart and steel in her spine. The skyline glittered like a crown, but to her, it felt cold, distant, empty. At 33, Emily had everything the world believed she should want. She was the CEO of Elena, a global fashion brand praised for its fierce elegance and minimalist perfection. Forbes had named her one of the most influential women under 40. She attended gala dinners, rubbed shoulders with senators and celebrities, and wore power like a tailored suit. And yet, every night when the city's lights began to outshine the fading sun, she opened the bottom drawer of her nightstand and pulled out the same two things: a creased photograph and a silver ring, simple, worn, and scratched at the edges. The photo was taken 7 years ago. She was 26 then, smiling, radiant, in a white dress. Beside her stood a man in a cheap suit, his arm around her shoulder, his grin crooked but honest. Jack Monroe. The man she had once believed would be her forever. But forever had ended before it began. Back then, she had just graduated from Columbia, full of dreams and rebellion. Jack was a construction worker in Pittsburgh who fixed her car when it broke down on a weekend trip. He had kind eyes, rough hands, and no patience for pretense. She fell in love quickly, foolishly, deeply. They married in secret. When she discovered she was pregnant, she thought they could build a life together, away from the pressure of her family, away from the sharp expectations of her mother, Margaret Carter. But her mother had other plans. When Emily returned to New York to tell her family the truth, Margaret didn't shout or cry. She simply smiled tightly, made a few calls, and within days, Emily was on a plane to Europe for an opportunity of a lifetime with a prestigious fashion house. A deal had been arranged, a story had been told, and a wall had been built between Emily and everything she loved. When the baby came, early, after a stressful pregnancy in a Paris hospital, Margaret was there. Cold and efficient as always. The morning after delivery, Margaret handed her a document and uttered 6 words that shattered her world: the baby didn't make it. Emily never saw her daughter's face. Just a white blanket being wheeled away. She screamed. She sobbed. She asked questions. But all she received was silence. And then, she stopped asking. Emily buried herself in work. She built her empire, silencing every aching thought with numbers, contracts, and champagne toasts. She told no one about Jack. No one about the child. It became a ghost story in the back of her mind, something too painful to revisit and too unreal to accept. Meanwhile, in the crumbling edges of Pittsburgh, Jack Monroe woke up every day at 4:30 a.m. to prepare breakfast for his daughter Sophie. 6 years old now, she had Jack's dark hair and Emily's green eyes. She was small for her age but sharp-witted, with a smile that could knock the wind out of him. Every night, Jack read her stories and tucked her into bed with the same promise: no matter what, Daddy's here. Jack never told Sophie the truth about her mother. Not really. She knew her mommy was far away and special, and that she loved you once very much. But beyond that, there was silence. Jack couldn't bring himself to explain what had really happened, not when he didn't fully understand it himself. After Emily disappeared, he had searched for her. Letters went unanswered. Her number was disconnected. Then Margaret Carter called him. Her voice was cold, measured, almost polite. "She doesn't want to see you, Jack. You were a mistake. Take the child. Do your duty as a man. That's all you're good for." Those words haunted him. But he didn't fight. He couldn't. He didn't have the money or the connections. So, he raised Sophie on his own. Took on every job he could. Worked construction during the day, drove rideshare at night. Paid the bills, skipped meals, bought crayons and birthday cakes. He never told Sophie he was sick. That his heart wasn't working the way it used to. That some mornings, he had to lean against the bathroom sink to catch his breath. That every time he lifted a heavy box, his vision swam. He figured he'd deal with it later. After she grew up. After he saved enough. But later didn't wait. One gray Tuesday afternoon, as Jack was finishing a shift at a renovation site, he felt the tightness in his chest return, sharp, immediate. He staggered. His co-worker shouted. He collapsed. Sophie had come to meet him. She had made a habit of walking to the site with her little backpack, waiting by the chain-link fence with a snack and a smile.
She saw it all. She screamed. She ran. No one stopped her. It began to rain.
Cold, stinging drops soaked through her clothes as she reached the emergency entrance of Mercy General Hospital. She stood in front of the automatic doors, crying, shouting, then dropping to her knees. Her hands pressed together in prayer, her voice cracking.
Please help my daddy. Please don't let him die. I'll be good. I promise. Just save him. Please. People gathered. Someone took out a phone. A nurse rushed out. Sophie's cries echoed under the gray sky.
A few hours later, in Midtown Manhattan, Emily Carter sat in the back of a black town car, glancing at her phone. Her assistant had sent her a video with a single line of text, "You need to see this."
Emily clicked.
A soaked little girl on her knees, begging in the rain.
Emily's breath caught. The child had green eyes. Her green eyes.
And behind her, a man being wheeled into the hospital on a stretcher.
Jack. The world tilted.
She didn't ask the driver to turn around.
She didn't speak.
She simply pressed her fingers against the phone screen, trying to believe what her eyes refused to deny.
Her daughter was alive. And Jack. Jack never left.
Everything she had been told was a lie. And for the first time in years, Emily Carter felt something fracture in her chest.
Not pain. Hope.
Emily Carter stood just inside the glass doors of Mercy General Hospital, motionless. The sharp scent of antiseptic clung to the air, mixing with the sterile hum of fluorescent lights and the muffled cries of distant patients.
She had come alone. No bodyguards, no assistant. Just her and the ache in her chest that refused to settle. She hadn't planned it.
She had just gotten in the car and told the driver to take her to the hospital from the video.
Her hands had trembled the whole ride.
She kept replaying the clip, the little girl in the rain, the panic in her voice, the way her small hands clasped together as if prayer could undo fate.
Emily had told herself it couldn't be real. It was just a coincidence. Children look like people all the time. But deep down, a part of her already knew.
And when she saw the girl sitting in the waiting room, curled up in an adult-sized chair, wrapped in a too-big hospital blanket, her wet shoes sitting on a sheet of newspaper, Emily's knees nearly buckled.
The girl looked up. Their eyes met. Green.
The same unusual shade Emily had inherited from her grandmother. The same color Emily saw in the mirror every morning. No one in Jack's family had those eyes.
The girl blinked, cautious. Are you the lady from the video? Emily crouched slowly. Yes, she said softly. My name is Emily.
The girl nodded, expression unreadable.
My name's Sophie. My dad's in surgery. Emily hesitated. Can I sit with you?
Sophie shrugged, moving over instinctively. Emily sat beside her, careful to leave space. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that hummed with electricity, tension, something unspoken hanging between them. Then Sophie pulled something out of her little backpack. A small photograph, creased at the edges.
She handed it to Emily. Emily stared.
It was a photo of her, 7 years younger, wearing a sundress, laughing with Jack in some sun-drenched park.
He had his arm around her. She remembered the moment. Jack had said something ridiculous. She had laughed so hard, she nearly fell over. He caught her and clicked the camera at the same time. She hadn't seen this photo in years. Daddy looks at it every night, Sophie said quietly. He says this was when he was the happiest. Emily felt the sting in her throat. Do you know who that is? She asked, pointing to herself in the picture. Sophie looked up at her. It's my mom, she said. But Daddy said she went away. That she was special. That she couldn't stay, but she loved me very much. Emily's vision blurred. She looked down at the child beside her, her daughter, and wondered how the world had allowed this to happen. How had she let this happen? The sound of footsteps pulled her attention. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. Are you here for Mr. Jack Monroe? Emily stood. Yes. The nurse glanced at Sophie, then back to Emily. Are you family? Emily opened her mouth, then hesitated. Yes, she said finally. I'm his wife. Or I was. The nurse looked uncertain but nodded. He's out of surgery. He's stable but in recovery. He'll need rest, but you can see him for a few minutes. Emily turned to Sophie. Would you like to go in first? Sophie shook her head. You can go. I already told him I love him before he went in. That's the most important thing. Emily smiled, her heart swelling and breaking all at once. She followed the nurse through the sterile hallways until they reached a quiet recovery room. Jack lay on the bed, pale, tubes running from his arm, a monitor beeping rhythmically. He looked older, more tired, but still him. The strong jaw, the slight scar above his right eyebrow, the peaceful expression he always had when he was asleep. She stepped forward slowly, unable to stop the tears. Jack, she whispered. His eyes fluttered open, sluggishly at first. Then focused. He blinked once, then again, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Emily. His voice was raspy, raw. She nodded. I'm here. He tried to sit up, winced, then gave up. What, how? He croaked. She pulled the chair closer, sat beside him, and took his hand gently. I saw the video. Sophie. The rain. You. He looked down, ashamed. I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want you to find out this way. She shook her head. Jack. I didn't know she was alive. His eyes snapped to hers. My mother told me she died. After birth. In Paris. She told me, you wrote a letter. That you didn't want us. That you left. Jack's face twisted in pain, not just physical. I never wrote a letter. I tried to reach you. I came to your apartment. Your office. No one let me in. Then your mother called and told me you didn't want me, but the baby was mine. She said you were gone. Forever. Emily's throat tightened. She lied to both of us. They sat in silence, the realization sinking in. You raised her alone, Emily whispered. Jack nodded. I did my best. She's a good kid. Too good for this world, sometimes. She's incredible, Emily said, eyes wet again. I saw it in just a few minutes. He studied her. Do you want to be in her life? Emily looked at him, her heart open, vulnerable for the first time in years. I don't know how to fix what's broken. But yes. I want to try. If you'll let me. Jack closed his eyes for a moment. Then opened them again, softer. It's not about me. It's about her. She deserves the truth. And she deserves a mom who stays. Emily nodded. I won't leave again. Jack gave a tired smile. Then we'll figure it out. Together. When Emily returned to the waiting room, Sophie was curled up on the chair again, her head tilted to one side. When she saw Emily, she sat up. Is he okay? Emily smiled. He's going to be fine. Sophie exhaled in relief. Then asked, did he tell you about the time we got locked out of the house and had to sleep in the truck? Emily laughed. No. You'll have to tell me that story sometime. Sophie grinned. Then paused. You remind me of her. My mom. Emily knelt in front of her. Sophie, can I tell you a secret? The girl leaned in. I am your mom. Sophie stared at her, eyes wide. Really? Emily nodded. I didn't know you were alive. I thought. I lost you. But now that I've found you, I don't want to let go again. If you'll let me be part of your life. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and wrapped her arms around Emily's neck. I've been waiting for you. And in that hospital waiting room, beneath the hum of machines and the distant buzz of overhead speakers, two worlds that had once been torn apart began to stitch themselves back together. For 3 days, Emily stayed at the hospital. She barely slept, afraid that if she closed her eyes, everything would disappear again. Jack's condition stabilized, but the doctors insisted on keeping him under observation. He was weak but awake, and sometimes when Sophie wasn't around, he and Emily spoke quietly, as if afraid their voices might break the fragile peace that had settled between them. Emily watched Sophie and Jack together and felt both joy and shame twisting inside her. The way Sophie looked at him, trusting, adoring, was everything a child should feel for a parent. And yet Emily had missed 6 years of that. 6 birthdays. 6 Christmas mornings. 6 years of bedtime stories she never got to tell. On the 3rd morning, Emily stepped outside to make a call.
The number she dialed was etched into her memory, though she hadn't used it in years. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Emily," Margaret Cotta said, calm and cool as ever. "I was wondering when you'd call." Emily gripped the phone tighter. "You lied to me." There was a pause. "I did what was necessary. You told me my baby died." "I spared you from a life of regret and struggle," Margaret replied. "Do you think you would have built your company with a child and a construction worker dragging you down? You have a future now, Emily. A life people envy." "I had a life," Emily snapped. "And you destroyed it. You destroyed us." Her mother's tone sharpened. "Watch how you speak to me. I did what I had to do. That man was never going to give you the world. I did." Emily's voice trembled. "He gave me love, Mom. And you took it away." There was silence on the line. Then Margaret said coldly, "If you're calling because of that girl, be careful. She might not even be yours." Emily froze. "What did you just say?" "I told you. The hospital made a mistake years ago. There was another baby born that night. Files got mixed. It's possible that child isn't yours." "That's impossible." Margaret's tone softened, almost pitying. "You don't know everything, Emily. And sometimes not knowing is a mercy. Let the past stay buried." The call disconnected before Emily could answer. She stood in the courtyard, the phone heavy in her hand, the sound of her mother's words echoing through her mind. That night, she couldn't eat. Jack noticed the distance in her eyes. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "She called me," Emily said. "My mother. She said Sophie might not be ours." Jack's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "That's ridiculous." "I know," Emily said quickly, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "Still, I need to know."
I can't live with anotherly. Jack setis fork down. You really think your mother could have done something like that?
Emily looked at him, tears burning her eyes. She already did. The next morning, she called the hospital. The doctor arranged for a DNA test. Emily didn't tell Sophie what it was for, she just said it was a health check. Sophie giggled as the nurse swabbed her cheek, unaware of the storm brewing around her. While they waited for results, life seemed to pause. Jack started walking again, slowly, with Sophie holding his hand like a guide. Emily helped him sign discharge papers, and the three of them returned to the small apartment Jack rented near the city's edge. It was cramped, old, and smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee.
Emily found it beautiful.
One evening, while Jack slept, Sophie sat next to Emily on the couch, coloring. "Mom," she said suddenly, without looking up.
Emily's briscote.
It was the first time Sophie had said it.
"Yes, sweetheart."
"Are you mad at Grandma?" Emily hesitated. "Why do you ask?" "I heard you talking on the phone," Sophie said.
You were crying.
Daddy said Grandma helped when I was a baby. Emily swallowed hard. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, Sophie. Even when they think they're doing the right thing."
Sophie puer crayon down.
"Did Grandma do something bad?" Emily reached over, brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "She did something that hurt people. But that doesn't mean I don't still love her."
Love is complicated.
Sophie nodded slowly. "Like when Daddy says he's fine but I know he's not?" Emily smiled sadly. "Exactly like that." 2 days later, the hospital called. Emily's heart pounded as she listened. When she hung up, she sat motionless for several minutes, unable to breathe.
Jack found her like that.
"The results." Emily nodded. "She's ours. Sophie's really ours." He let out a long, shaky breath. Relief flooded the room, but it was bittersweet. The truth was out, but the scars it revealed were deep. Later that night, as rain began tapping gently against the window, Jack stirred in his chair. "Emily, what are you going to do about your mother?" "I don't know," she said softly. "She needs to know the damage she caused. But part of me still wants to understand why." Jack looked at her for a long time before speaking. "Sometimes understanding doesn't bring peace. Sometimes it just opens the wound again." "I know," Emily whispered. "But I can't move on until I face her." Before Jack could answer, they heard a noise from the hallway.
Sophie's door creaked open.
Mom, her small voice called. Emily stood.
What is wrong, baby?
Sophie clutched something to her chest, a folded piece of paper. I found this in Daddy's drawer. Emily unfolded it. Her hands trembled. It was a handwritten letter, addressed to my girls. She read the first lines aloud. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I'm sorry. I wanted you to have a better life, even if it didn't include me.
Emilie's voice cracked.
She stopped. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. He's not going to die, right? Emily knelt, wrapping her arms around her daughter. No, honey. He's not going anywhere. I promise. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Emily confronted Jack about the letter. I wrote it when the doctors first diagnosed me, he admitted quietly. Just in case. I never meant for her to find it. Emily closed her eyes. She's terrified now. I'll talk to her tomorrow, he said. I'll tell her I'm not going anywhere. But the next morning, when Emily woke up, the apartment was quiet.
Sophie's bed was empty.
Her backpack was gone.
Panic hit like lightning.
She tore through the apartment, calling her name, then ran out into the street. Jack, pale and breathless, followed behind her.
Sophie. Emily screamed. Sophie, please.
Neighbors came to their windows. A car horn blared. It wasn't until an hour later that Emily spotted the small figure standing at the bus stop, soaked in rain again, holding her father's letter in her hands. When Emily reached her, Sophie's voice trembled.
I don't want Daddy to die.
I don't want you to go away again. Emily knelt in front of her, pulling her close.
No one is leaving.
I promise. We're going to stay together this time. Sophie looked up at her through tears. Promise. Promise. Emily held her tighter, as if she could shield her from every storm still waiting ahead. And as Jack limped toward them, rain dripping from his hair, the three of them stood together under the gray sky, bound by pain, by truth, and by something stronger than either of them had believed possible, hope. The next morning began like any other, with sunlight slipping between the blinds and the distant noise of traffic rising like a low hum. But Emily woke to something different, an eerie stillness. She turned toward the other side of the bed, where Jack had fallen asleep in his armchair after the long emotional night. He was still. Too still. Jack? She whispered. No response. She reached for his hand. It was clammy. His breathing was shallow, uneven. A soft wheeze accompanied each exhale.
Jacques. She called loudly, panic rising.
Sophie, awakened by the shout, appeared in the doorway with wide, frightened eyes.
What is wrong with Daddy?
Emily didn't answer. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911 with shaking fingers, and dropped to her knees beside Jack, trying to wake him. His eyes fluttered, but he didn't speak. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Sophie clung to Emily in the back seat of the vehicle as paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Jack's condition. His blood pressure was dropping. His pulse was fading in and out. The hospital looked familiar now. It had become something of a battleground for them, a place of discoveries and heartbreaks. But this time, the stakes were different. This wasn't just about the past anymore. This was about now. About keeping him alive. In the waiting room, Sophie sat silently, her hands clasped tightly around the letter she had found. The one Jack had written in secret. Her lips moved in whispers no one could hear. Emily sat beside her, trying to keep it together. But the reality hit her in waves. If he didn't make it, Sophie would lose the only parent she had ever known. And Emily, she would lose her second chance before it even began. The doctor came out an hour later, face tense. He has a serious arrhythmia. We need to perform surgery immediately to repair the damage. A valve replacement. But his heart is weak. There's significant risk.
What are the chances?
Emily asked. The doctor hesitated. We've had successes with worse cases. But the patient must consent. He's conscious now, and he's refusing the procedure. Emily stared. What? He says he doesn't want to risk dying on the table. He says he wants to spend what time he has left with his daughter. Emily didn't wait. She rushed through the halls until she found his room. Jack was lying there, hooked up to machines, pale and worn, but alert. "Why are you saying no?" she demanded. He didn't look at her right away. "Because if I die in that operating room, Sophie loses both of us again. And she won't recover from that." "She'll lose you anyway," Emily said, her voice cracking. "This isn't mercy. This is fear." Jack looked at her finally.
You don't understand.
"I've seen the way she looks at you now. She's finally got you."
I'm not going to be the reason she watch it all fall apart again. Emily shook her head, furious and heartbroken. You don't get to decide when it's over.
"Not when there's still a chance. Not when she still needs you." Just then, the door creaked open. Sophie stepped in, her eyes red-rimmed, her face pale. She held the letter in her hands. "Daddy," she said, voice small but steady.
You can't leave US. Jacques' lips parted, but no sound came out.
Sophie walked to his bedside and placed the letter gently on his chest. "You wrote this because you thought we'd be okay without you. But we won't be. I won't." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I don't care if you're scared. I'm scared too. But I still want you to try. Please try." Jack turned his head toward her.
Pumpkin.
"I don't want a letter," she whispered. "I want you." Jack's eyes filled. He looked at Emily. "You agree with her?" Emily reached out, took his hand. "More than anything." He closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them and nodded.
Tell the doctor.
"I'll do it."
Sophie smiled through tears. Thank you, Daddy.
As they prepped him for surgery, Emily and Sophie waited in the quiet corridor. Sophie curled up beside her mother, holding tightly to her arm. "Mom," she whispered. "Is he gonna die?" Emily swallowed. "The doctors are going to do everything they can. And Daddy is strong. He's fought for you every day of your life. He won't stop now." Sophie leaned her head on Emily's shoulder. "I don't want to lose him." "I know," Emily said, stroking her hair. "Me neither." The hours crept by like days. A nurse brought them water and snacks, which sat untouched. At one point, Emily closed her eyes and began to pray, not to a God she believed in, but to anything that could hear her. "Please. Let him come back. Please let our family stay whole this time.
Please let love be enough."
Finally, the surgeon emerged. Emily stood up, heart pounding. "He made it through," the doctor said. "The surgery was successful. He's weak and will need time, but he's alive." Emily gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. Sophie jumped to her feet. "He's okay." The doctor smiled. "He's okay." Emily dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around Sophie, sobbing with relief. Later, when they were allowed into the recovery room, Jack was awake, barely, but smiling. "Hey," he whispered hoarsely. "You scared us," Emily said, sitting beside him. "Guess I'm not that easy to get rid of," he murmured. Sophie climbed into the chair next to the bed and took his hand. "You promised you'd stay," she whispered. "And you did."
Jacques blinked, tears forming. "I'll always keep my promise to you."
A week later, they left the hospital together. Not as a broken triangle of what might have been, but as a family. They didn't have a grand plan yet. No answers about the future. But they had something that, for now, was more than enough. Each other. And somewhere deep inside, Emily knew, life had given her a second chance not just to love, but to be loved in return. The sky over Vermont was the color of clean linen, stretched wide above rolling hills dotted with golden trees. Autumn had arrived, quiet and kind, bringing with it a hush that felt like healing. The old house at the edge of a sleepy town wasn't much to look at, peeling white paint, a slanted porch, windows that needed replacing, but to Emily it was perfect. It was far from Manhattan's noise and pressure.
Far from the ghosts of boardroom and broken promise.
It was a place where silence was a gift, not a punishment. Jack stood on the porch with a mug of coffee, his movements slower than before, but steadier now. He watched Sophie running through a pile of leaves in the yard, arms outstretched like airplane wings, her laughter echoing through the trees. "You'll catch a cold," he called out gently. Sophie grinned and ignored him.
Only if he stopped flying.
Emily emerged from inside, pulling on a sweater. She walked up beside Jack and handed him a blanket to throw over his shoulders. "She's been happier these past few weeks than I've ever seen her," Emily said.
Jack nodded. "Me too."
They had moved into the house a month after his surgery. A real estate agent had shown it as a joke, total fixer-upper, she'd warned, but Emily saw something in it.
Something gros and waiting.
Jack agreed. It was a home that needed work. Just like them.
They bought it with what savings they had. Emily sold a portion of her stake in Elena, much to the shock of her business partners.
But she didn't care. She wasn't walking away from success.
She was walking towards something better. They turned the ground floor into a small cafe and bookstore, which opened on weekends.
Jack baked. Emily brewed.
Sophie organized the children's section and named the store herself
Sophie's Light.
Locals came out of curiosity, then stayed for the warmth. Not just the coffee or the scones, but the way the three of them moved through the space like music, imperfect, unrehearsed, but undeniably in sync. One evening, just as twilight brushed the sky, Emily sat on the porch with a notebook in her lap. Jack joined her, a bit winded from fixing a loose floorboard in the kitchen.
He looked at her sideways. "You're writing again."
"I guess I am," she said. "It's not fashion columns or business reports this time. Just thoughts."
Thoughts worth sharing.
Emily looked down at her belly, then smiled softly.
"I hope so."
Jack blinked.
"Wait. Are you saying?"
She nodded.
"I'm 10 weeks along."
He stared speechless, before letting out a choked laugh.
"We're doing this again?"
"We're doing this right," she said, reaching for his hand. Jack pulled her into an embrace, resting his chin on her shoulder.
"Thank you," he whispered. "For what?"
"For not giving up. On us. On yourself."
Emily exhaled, the wecht off à tous en past regret dissolving into the cool evening air.
"I gave up once," she said.
"You wanted do it again."
Inside, Sophie peeked through the window, pretending not to spy. She had drawn a picture earlier that day, 3 stick figures under a rainbow, with a 4th tiny one inside a heart. Above them, she had written in careful, blocky letters, "My family." When Jack went back inside to clean up, Emily sat a while longer. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting golden ribbons across the porch. She opened her notebook again and began to write. "They told me I'd lose everything if I chose love. But I lost more when I chose fear. Now I know. You don't measure life by what you build, but by who stands beside you when everything else falls apart. This time, I choose differently. This time I choose us." A week later, a package arrived. No return address. But the handwriting was unmistakable. Inside the box was a faded teddy bear, a letter, and a locket Emily hadn't seen since she was a teenager. She opened the letter slowly. "Emily, I watched the news. I saw the video. I knew you would find her. I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did was born from fear, from pride. But not from hate. I wanted to protect you from the life I thought would break you. Instead, I broke something beautiful. I don't deserve your kindness. But if there's a place in your heart, someday, know that mine has never stopped loving you. Mom." Emily folded the letter and held it to her chest. She didn't cry. Not this time. The grief was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She would write back. Not today. But one day. Later that evening, the cafe was full of laughter and quiet conversation. Neighbors chatted over warm drinks. Children sat cross-legged near Sophie's corner, reading books out loud to one another. Jack brought Emily a cup of tea. "Want to close up early?" She glanced at the clock. "We can stay open a little longer." He smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. As the day wound down, Sophie came up to Emily with a serious look on her face. "Mom." "Yes, baby." "Do you think our new baby will like pumpkin pie?" Emily laughed. "I think so." "Good. Because I'm going to make one for their first birthday." Jack knelt beside them. "That's a long time from now." "I know," Sophie said confidently. "That gives me time to practice." Emily pulled her close. "You're going to be the best big sister." Sophie leaned her head on Emily's shoulder. "I think we're gonna be okay." Outside,
The stars began to appear. No press cameras.
No headlines.
No more secrets.
Just the sound of wind in the trees, a warm light in the window, and the soft promise of a future written not by fear or control, but by the quiet courage of love that chooses to stay. And in that small Vermont town, under a sky wide enough for all their dreams, a broken family became whole.
Not perfect, but real. And that, at last, was enough.